So there you go. You come back.
Yeah.
Bill.
Thank you all for coming here today. To date, over 4,000 Ontarians have signed a petition at rowanslaw.ca, including every single member of Ottawa City Council in the community that not only I reside in, but so do the Stringers. Hundreds more have helped with hashtag Rowan's Law to get it to trend on Twitter today, calling for a concussion law at Queen's Park. And we encourage all media that have joined us here today to also use hashtag Rowan's Law. This afternoon, I will introduce a co-sponsored bill in the name of Rowan Stringer, a 17-year-old girl who died tragically in my community of Nepean Carleton from a concussion while playing rugby. In support of Rowan's Law, I'm pleased to be joined today by my constituents, Kathleen and Gord Stringer, Rowan's mom and dad, my colleagues, Catherine Fife of the New Democrats, and John Fraser of the Liberal Caucus. Each will provide brief remarks. Also joining us today are Paul Hunter of Rugby Canada, Will Stort representing the NHLPA, Francis Flint from the Ontario Athletic Therapist Association, and Dr. Cameron Marshall, President of Complete Concussion Management. They've joined us in case you have any questions that are technical that the politicians and the parents can't answer. This past year, a coroner's inquest was held into Rowan Stringer's death. It cited 49 recommendations in its report to better treat, talk about, and educate the public, particularly athletes, coaches, and parents on the effects of concussions. Many of these recommendations are within the jurisdiction of the province of Ontario. And that's why I was approached by Mr. and Mrs. Stringer to move Rowan's Law through Queen's Park this past June. If Rowan's Law passes, it will be the first concussion law in Canada, and Rowan's Law could save lives. The bill itself will mandate the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport to establish a committee made up of representatives from his ministry, as well as education, health, and children and youth. They will provide an implementation plan for the provincial recommendations within the coroner's report. There will be a one-year time frame attached to this bill, and I am specifically grateful to Minister Michael Couteau for his support, indicating it once again this morning during question period. I'm also beyond humbled and somewhat emotional that members of all political parties at Queen's Park have indicated their support for Rowan's Law, and I am grateful to MPPs Fife and Fraser who have agreed to sponsor Rowan's Law with me. Above all, I am inspired by Kathleen and Gordon Stringer for their strength and poise as they create awareness about the impact of concussions and the potential fatalities that may occur as they work for better treatment and education across Ontario in the face of their tragic loss. I'd like to ask Gord and Kathleen to join me at the podium to speak about Rowan's Law and why it is so important for Ontario to pass this critical legislation. Thank you. Gordon, Kathleen?
Thank you, Lisa. I'd just like to speak a bit about why this law is so important to us. Rowan was one of those children that was nurturing right from day one. She got a little doll named Michaela, and she took care of that just like it was real, putting diapers on it and little sleepers, taking it out for walks and putting it in a crib at night. Her goal was to go to Ottawa University in nursing, and she had been accepted for the fall of 2013. She wasn't able to complete that, and I feel it very important that we do something in her honor to make sure that we do something for children, because that's what she would have done. And we feel that this law will help protect children and take care of them, and she would be very proud of that. The other reason that we're here today is because it's almost impossible to describe losing a child. It's a devastating, tragic loss. And the grief journey, as I'm finding out, actually doesn't really end. It just changes. I would never want another family to have to experience this again. And I would be just devastated to find out that another child in Canada dies from second impact syndrome. So because of that, I feel compelled to work as hard as I can to get this law passed so that no other family goes through this grief journey.
Just to add to what Kathleen said, I'd like to ensure that I express our family's thanks to Lisa, Catherine, and John for co-sponsoring this bill, and for the caucus's support behind it. One thing about Rowan was she was a person who did bring people together, and this is the way she would want it to happen. This isn't a political issue. It's a health and safety issue. It's for kids. It doesn't need a political stripe on it. So I was very pleased to have all parties in the legislature showing support for it. One thing that came out of the inquest was something I didn't know, but Bill 36 died on the table in the fall of 2012, just before Rowan's passing. It would be a terrible tragedy to have another opportunity to get concussion legislation in place fail. So I'm looking to all members of the provincial legislature to show up on December 10th, to debate as they need to debate, and to pass this legislation into law. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's very good to be here today with the Stringers and both of my colleagues. And you didn't hear this story this morning, but the thing that struck me most about the Stringers is, at a time when they were very vulnerable, just after their daughter had passed, they did two things. First of all, they donated her organs, which is a difficult choice. But then they had another choice to make, which was people were calling them, people such as yourselves. And it was fresh, and they were vulnerable, and they made a decision to open themselves up to people because they felt this issue was important, and they wanted to honor Rowan. That was a very courageous thing to do, because you're very vulnerable. The inclination is to turn in. So I wanted to put that out there on the record, that their courage and determination has done their daughter proud. I'm very thankful for Lisa and the Stringers for all their hard work, and for Lisa for asking both Catherine and I to co-sponsor this bill. The co-sponsoring bills are less than a decade old, and it's an excellent opportunity for us to give expression to those things that we all hold important, and that's what Rowan Laws does. And I turn it over to my colleague Catherine.
Thank you very much, and it's a privilege actually to be in this place and to be part of co-sponsoring a piece of legislation like Rowan's Law. I was honored when Lisa first approached me, and I'm very pleased to join with John, and I share the admiration and of the courage of the Stringer family. For me, the connection to concussions is also very personal. When I was president of the Ontario Public School Boards Association, we were getting calls from across the province from parents actually, and from athletic associations who were unsure how to navigate through the issue of concussions. And I think the severity of concussions was not fully understood, and school boards did not have effective return to play or return to learn strategies. And I too, my son played hockey and received 2 concussions, and then that was it. But we went on that journey as well as parents, and so the opportunity to educate and to empower parents and school boards and to use this opportunity to really honor the life of Rowan is a rare opportunity for us as politicians, and I'm just thankful and grateful to be a part of the process. Thank you.
That concludes our remarks. If there are any media questions, I just ask that you direct it to an individual and they'll speak. And if you have any questions for any of our guests here today, please let us know that as well. Any tough questions, we're actually going to send over to Paul Hunter of Rugby Canada because he actually understands what a real scrum is. And the tough ones will be given to him. You'll do that for me, won't you, Paul?
I'll try my best.
Okay, thank you. So,
Lisa, for you, why, if there are already these 49 recommendations from the coroner's inquest, why create an advisory committee to look at those recommendations with this bill? Why not take sort of another step forward?
this would be an implementation bill. One of the challenges we found when Gordon and Kathleen first came to see me is the fact that the 49 recommendations literally are in a variety of different jurisdictions, some which we do not have any say over. So we had to weed out what was actually within the provincial jurisdictions. Some of these recommendations don't need to be actually in law, they just need to be done. And that's why we spoke, and what the recommendations of the legal team here at Queen's Park suggested is taking the provincial recommendations, put a team in place that can consult on how to best implement them across party lines. And I give a great deal of credit to my colleague John Fraser, because one of the different things that we did with this bill is instead of me just drafting a bill, and there were multiple versions, I think 5 or 6, that had a vast amount of consultation, is I gave it to John and I said, what can the Liberals live with? What can the government live with in terms of getting this bill passed so that these recommendations will in some cases become law and other measures become PPMs or have some financing attached to them within the Ministry of Education or other places. And he took it back to his caucus, and this truly was a tripartite response to a very serious issue, and that's how we felt we could best move this along. So they're not going to be studying the recommendations in so much as they will be looking at them and given a year to try and implement them over the next year. And again, some of them I think could probably, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that just we have to talk to coaches, we have to talk to players, we have to talk to medical experts on how best to implement them. And this isn't the first coroner's inquest that has been called into the death of a child in my constituency, where I've had to sort of deal with the recommendations, but also the jurisdictional and political reality that we live in. So unfortunately, I had a bit more seasoning with this than maybe I would want as a result of that.
Sorry. Have you talked to Minister Coteau about it, and if so, what did
Yeah, you know, again, I give a lot of credit to John Fraser for talking to his ministerial colleagues, but poor Michael Coteau, I think I've nagged him effectively since September on this bill, and he's quite comfortable in having this as part of his mandate. He indicated to me today in question period, we had a quick chat before the proceedings began, indicated yes, he is supportive of it, anything he can do, and I know on behalf of Gordon, Kathleen, and my entire community, this is very big for the people of Ottawa, as John will tell you, and I know it's very big for the people of Kitchener-Waterloo, so we really appreciate the minister going above and beyond there. And again, it's really part of that process. Instead of saying, okay, let's put forward a bill, maybe 3 MPPs can co-sponsor it, and then, you know, we'll see what everybody's happy with. This really was multiple drafts working with all of the ministries, many of our stakeholders who are here today in order to make this a reality. And I can't stress enough that this would be the first law of its kind when it is passed in all of Canada. And if you look, you know, south of the border, this is far more prevalent than it is here. And I think from what we're understanding, what we're seeing across Ontario and now across Canada is people saying, you know what, I've had a concussion. My kid has had a concussion. I played hockey with someone who had a concussion, and it's time that we move this forward. I'll just ask, go ahead, but I just think maybe one or two of my colleagues may have something to add on the political process.
Well, I think if you're looking at what we're trying to, sorry, that's a bad habit.
Boss, our ridings are side by side.
Side by
so
side,
he's getting
and so
really tired.
she hasn't chirped me yet today. So
but it's coming.
I think that if it's coming, it's starting right now, Lisa. You don't even know when it's happening. Is that it's about awareness, and that's if you take a look at the coroner's recommendations, they're around awareness. Most of them are around awareness, and that's the reason that you're here today. That's the reason that that's the reason that we feel, I think all our colleagues, is that you're here today to help create that awareness. That bill will continue to do that, and because the danger is that parents and students and teachers and coaches don't recognize the symptoms and don't follow return to work and return to play and return to learn. So I turn it over to Catherine here.
So for me, what I liked most about the way that the bill is crafted is that it's also there's an accountability measure to it, so that there's and we're all accountable. All parties are going to be accountable for the recommendations from the inquest to be applied. And there's a reporting back too as well. So as Lisa mentioned, we have seen coroner reports and inquest, and we have those recommendations, but they're not necessarily actionable. So this is a commitment by all three of us to make sure that we see action on the inquest.
Lisa, sorry, I'm feeling like this is getting a bit processy here. Can you say what's the teeth in the law?
Yeah, they have a year to implement the recommendations, and that's dealing with a coroner's inquest. Before I was here with the Leighton family about 2 years ago with a young man who passed away in my community. When we had the coroner's inquest, there were a list of recommendations. I'm sure none of them have ever been implemented. This is actually an implementation plan for those that actually bridges the recommendations from what the coroner's report suggested occur, and us as members of the legislature saying, here are the recommendations, look at the provincial recommendations, make them happen in consultation with those who are going to be affected. And that's why we're hopeful that there will be representation not only from Rowan Stringer's father, but also from some of the parties that are here today. And that's critical.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if you take a look at the first recommendation, in terms of calling for a Rowan's Law, what happened with PPM 156, which is Policy Memo 156, it addresses the issues that school boards, and Catherine can speak to this later, school boards need to do to address concussions. And so there's a question of whether we need to make that law or whether that has to continue to remain a PPM. So there are specific things in there that we can address. And then there's a multiple cross-jurisdictional, there's school boards, federal government, sports agencies, ministries. So it's in those recommendations, they're complicated. That was one of the difficulties in putting the bill together. So I'll turn it over to Catherine if she's got anything to say.
Well, yesterday I was speaking to the head of athletics at Wilfrid Laurier, for instance, and I told him about Rowan's Law, and I said, I'm going to be sharing this information with you. I'd love for you to come to Queen's Park. He's president of all the university associations, and he was hungry for this information. So that means for me that there's a gap right now. And so what I think the goal is also to bring some continuity across all those jurisdictions, and especially the school boards have the PPM, but this is an opportunity around education and awareness as well, and possibly if the supports and if there are financial implications, which I think that there will be, then there's an accountability measure with this piece of legislation.
Can I ask the Stringers then? Could I just ask the Stringers if there's something, obviously you want all 49 recommendations to be implemented. Is there something in there, items in there that cry out to be implemented that you really think would make a difference?
Just 1 second. One thing we learned from the inquest, that right now in the curriculum, teachers do not have to discuss concussion at all. Imagine if Rowan had started in school and every year she had learned about concussions. She had learned about the fact that if you play with a concussion, then it can have terrible consequences. It's kind of like teaching our kids about drunk driving or bullying. If it's something they've learned from a young age, it's something they're aware of. Now, she did Google concussion, and she realized that concussions were dangerous or could be severe, but there was nothing when she Googled that came up with second impact syndrome. She did not know that there was a potential to have that kind of an outcome, that she could die from playing that game. And so we need to have the youth and the adults, coaches, parents educated, because we're confident that if Rowan had the knowledge, that she would have made a different choice. And the drastic thing with concussions is that there is no test. An MRI can't see a concussion. And so really self-reporting of your symptoms is what has to happen. And so these kids need the tools, and they need to be educated to make those decisions.
This is getting a little processy to me, but shouldn't contact sports be banned in, if it's so dangerous, shouldn't it be banned in school-age children, or be adults too?
Well,
why not eliminate the problem as opposed to trying to identify the problem?
because we don't actually think that contact sports are so dangerous. What we need to do is make sure that the proper safety measures are introduced, and that the sports are played according to rules, and the refs are reffing the game and sitting kids out that have infractions. We've never advocated for anything to change as far as kids playing sports. There's far too many things that are very important for children to play team sports and learn about commitment, learn about time management, learn about being a teammate. There's many studies done on the benefit of sport, and the bottom line is that you could get a concussion falling off your bicycle and you're not playing a team sport. You can get a concussion falling down a staircase. You could get it at home. And so really this is a far-reaching bill that would cover any child that goes to an ER and is seen by a doctor. They would all be treated exactly the same way, and there would be plans for return to school and return to play, even if it doesn't occur during a sporting event. The other thing we found out with the inquest is that kids that play on high school teams, those coaches are not necessarily contacting teams outside of the school. So there could be an injury at a high school game, and the team that they play with on the weekend isn't aware of it. And so there's those sorts of things that we need to sort out, how to get the communication there and how to make sure everybody's informed of what's going on with these kids in sports.
So just on that one, if I could just say,
Sure.
it's about the protocol piece, right? It's about having some continuity around protocol, because, you know, I mean, I did so many things wrong with when my son contracted his first concussion. I did everything wrong because I didn't know any better. An old wives' tale of waking them up every 20 minutes. You're not supposed to do that. And the second one, though, the second concussion happened when he fell and hit his head on the playground, and then the school didn't know how to deal with that as well. So we can't control when people get concussions necessarily, but we can control the protocol of how schools and families and athletic associations deal with the post-concussion.
But if you eliminate the high risks contact, and I know it's not banning the game, but changing the game, aren't you eliminating a lot of the problem? Because a lot of concussions come through hockey, rugby, lacrosse.
Yeah, well, there are some conversations in the States right now about banning heading in soccer, for instance, but I don't think that we're there. Right now, we're just trying to, I think, bring in the protocol piece.
We actually do have complete concussion management here. Would you like to come up and explain, sort of speak from that? And I know that there's been a couple questions on this is processy. Yeah, this is a process. We're putting a process in place in order to implement recommendations from a coroner's inquest, which cross many jurisdictions and many ministries, and this is the simplest way we can actually implement that. But I'll give you the just say your name for them. So
Dr. Cameron Marshall from Complete Concussion Management. The issue with banning just contact in sport in general is that people, like they said, are still going to get concussions no matter what. You could wrap people in bubble wrap, but the injuries are still going to happen. The issue that we're dealing with here is like they say, the process, because second impact syndrome is kind of what we're trying to get rid of. Is when people do get a concussion, they're held out for sport for the appropriate amount of time. They're integrated back into school properly, and they're integrated back into sport properly, so that by the time they do go back to sport, they're actually safe to be in that position. So that it's not a concussion problem necessarily. It's a second impact syndrome or a management problem.
Any other questions?
I'd like to hear from the stringers. It's a difficult question, but when you mentioned this, how this law, this bill in 2012, the province was looking at this, and I actually remember that being one of the, I covered when it was introduced, and when I remember when it died with prorogation. What's it like for you to know that this process was happening 3 years ago before your daughter died, and that it never happened?
One thing about our grief journey is there's all kinds of what ifs, and that's just one of the what ifs. You don't know if it would have made a difference. You'd like to think it might have, but you don't know for sure. What we do know for sure is we've been given a second chance on this now. And I would hate to see that second chance be thrown away. We've gone through what we have gone through for whatever reason. You know, it happened. We don't want anyone else to go through what we've gone through. And as Dr. Cameron mentioned, this is a management issue. It's a second impact syndrome issue. What we've learned from our discussions over the last 2 years with many experts in the medical field, from CHEO, from Dr. Charles Tatter in Toronto, is that concussion is curable. It's something that happens, but with proper treatment, it can be fully removed, fully healed. Your brain can heal back to itself. It needs the time, and with people, it's going to take different amounts of time for different people. So it's those management processes that need to be put in place and ensure that they happen when there's a suspected concussion. So this isn't about, and it never has been from our perspective, about, you know, forcing kids to wear helmets in rugby. Helmets don't help concussions. A helmet would have to reach inside your head and hold your brain in place in order to prevent a concussion. So this discussion around, oh, make them wear helmets, that's ridiculous. There's so much good in sport, as Kathleen said. We'd never advocate kids not playing sport, not playing hockey, not playing rugby. This is about a level of prevention in increasing knowledge and awareness, but also ensuring proper management once these things happen. That's really what we're getting at, is those management processes and education and awareness.
I'll ask you, how satisfied, both of you, if you want to talk, how satisfied are you that the law as it being drafted is going to have the kind of impact you want it to have?
I think if it's implemented and the process goes as it's supposed to go, with respect to establishment of a committee to give guidance to the government on how to implement those recommendations, if that is indeed what happens and it doesn't get bogged down somewhere, I think it will be fine, and it'll be a good process and a good outcome.
Any further questions? Thank you all very much.